tell me if we are. We're live. All right. So getting started early for the ones that watch this afterwards. So we'll wait some people come in the room. Hi Bob. Hi Too Nerd, Too White and Nerdy. Infamy. Hi everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the size matter. We're going to be talking about oil pumps, high volume oil pumps, non-high volume oil pumps, and oil pans. The size of the oil pans. So now we're getting into what we're going to start discussion about. And as always, anybody can either call in. Shop Mom can ask a question, ask on the text. Shop Mom always keeps the text, and she reads them, and she'll tell me what we're going to be talking about later. But right now, we're talking about the oil pans. And back in the day, we almost always, and a lot of people that I know, a lot of shops, it was always the thing to do is to put a high volume oil pump on. That was kind of like a rite of passage. The first thing you do when you get a car, you put a set of valve covers, air cleaner. Next is a camshaft. Then you're going to build it. You're always going to put a high volume oil pump in. And there's a lot of problems that can actually happen from trying to do something cool. For the most part, it doesn't really. Most people won't see the effect of why that would be bad or wrong. But I'm going to give you those examples and why we don't want to do that. High volume oil pumps pump a lot of volume. A stock oil pan, there's some vehicles that are even worse. Small block Chevy, depending what pan you have, if you have the Corvette pan or the truck pan even, you might not even see a problem because it's a big pan anyway. But depending on the vehicle, oil pans are made just enough to 4 quarts or whatever they can hold. That's where you're going to have the problem. In an endurance application, or even we live in Texas, the 281, you can get going pretty damn quick down 281 before you even come up to any place to stop. So you'll do a long stretch of high RPMs. You can suck the oil pan dry. What does that mean? A high volume is going to suck all the oil up and it doesn't get back into the pan. So in a long-term run, at the end of the quarter mile, you'll see little light flashing just for a split second. Endurance running, that's when you're going to see the effect of doing something wrong. For the most part, you're not revving that motor up that high that long. So even doing something wrong, you never saw a thing. And I'm going to have a bunch of controversy. I've been using a high volume oil pump for all my life. Yes, and I tell people, only because you've been doing something, wrong all your life, or not necessarily, you can't unlearn knowledge. So it's going to be controversial. So for the most part, if you have the application that you need a high volume pump, what application would that be? I'm building a big block Chevy, small block Chevy, a race motor, and I'm enlarging the clearances. So normally we would have 1.5 thousandths on the rod bearing clearance. That ain't gonna live on a race motor. High RPM, a lot of boost or anything. So we're gonna go to 2 thousandths rod bearing clearance, or more. A big block Chevy has over 3.5 on the mains. We're not going to be able to have any kind of oil pressure because we're not giving the motor enough volume for those extra clearances that we need for a race application. So in a stock motor, like I said, put a high volume pump, you'll never notice a difference. Old school, we wanted to see 60 pounds of oil pressure because that's just what we wanted. Oh my God, it's like a belt buckle. All your buddies all looking around and see that's more oil pressure. No. So you could suck the pan dry. In an application where we need a high volume pump, which is something with looser clearances because it's not stock anymore. There's a reason for it. Also, a turbocharged engine. A turbocharged engine, we're now sending oil not only to the engine, but we're sending it to the turbocharger. We may be sending it to an external oil cooler. We may be sending it to an external filter. It's a race application. Now you can see why we want more volume, because I'm not just feeding the rods and the mains anymore and the cam bearings. What am I also doing? I'm also feeding an external device, a turbocharger. Or like I said, I'm pumping it all the way to the front to a cooler. Those are different reasons why we would think now we want a high volume. We need more volume. We're going to need more volume. The Mitsubishi Conquest, what set the Mitsubishi Conquest apart from the regular 2.6 Mitsubishi? If you tore them apart, they were pretty much the same engine except we had pin oilers and we had a high volume pump. It came with a high volume pump from the factory. So back in the Mitsubishi days, I would put a Conquest turbo Mitsubishi oil pump on a non-turbo motor for racing. But those are applications that you want, if you're going to need the high volume pump, don't put it on a standard volume oil pan. you could suck it dry. So that's an application that they go hand in hand. High volume pump, high volume pan. Have more volume in your motor. These are just general rules. If you've polished the inside and you're getting all back into it as fast as you can, there's no one set rule, but for the most part, we don't want to, and I'm controversial from a lot of people that I know that are build engines. They always use a high volume pump. I don't use a high volume pump unless I need it, unless there's a reason for a high volume pump. I might go with a high pressure pump. Also, a big block Chevy, we're not going to run, 10W30 all on a big block Chevy. We're going to run, I'm talking about a race motor. You're going to run 2050, and it's a different animal. So you can't take one example that you saw on YouTube, Google, or read in a Hot Rod magazine and say, I'm going to add that to my motor because I saw they gained. Just make sure you design or you build your motor with the right intent. Also, because I'm not going to let a live stream ever go by, and it's not that I'm doing it intentional, but it's in my essence. I'm going to talk about Chief, my uncle, and I'm going to talk about Smokey Eunuch. So both of those is where I get all my basic instinct, or what I'm made of, is these two people. So you cannot compress a liquid. If you cannot compress a liquid and you go to a high pressure or high volume, generally, a lot of times the high volume pump will come with a high pressure spring in it. A Melling I'm talking about, you can use any other brand you want. It'll come with another spring in the box, and it'll say, has a high pressure spring on it. If you want it, you don't want that, you pull that spring out and you put a regular tension spring. It comes in the box, with it. So you can decide if you want high volume and high pressure, or high volume and high pressure, or one or the other. So there you go. My talks about if we want to go, why there's a reason for it. I generally, don't just go automatically into a high volume thing. Shop Mom's bringing me great. This is awesome.
Austin wanted you to show that.
So Austin wanted me to show this. This came off of, it wasn't our build. It came in for somebody that wanted to see why and point of finger, That's a scat forged rod. You see that? I don't know if y'all can see that if I get my head out of the way. So you cannot compress a liquid. It doesn't matter how much you try. So what happened in this particular instance, it got water in the cylinder. You cannot compress a liquid. I've seen not quite as bad as this one, but even too much fuel in the cylinder. You can flood by the injectors hanging open and just dumping tons of fuel. You know what kind of force it took to do this? Because you cannot compress a liquid. So that's why hydraulics in a land mover, a dump, all in big trucks, dump trucks, how do they dump all that on there? Hydraulic pressure. It's liquid hoses going to a ram because you cannot compress a liquid. It's going to move the dump truck or whatever. So that's another reason why, too much oil pressure is bad. Okay, it's too much oil pressure is bad in so many different ways. So that's going to go not from the subject of the volume and the pump. I'm going to stay with this until somebody asks another question or gets me on a different subject. But you cannot compress the liquid. That's one thing, right? So it's costing you horsepower. You're thinking that by adding, I saw Billy Bob. I'm always using Billy. I need a disclaimer. I'm not against Billy at all. But I saw Billy doing this, so I did it on mine. If you didn't have a need for it, you cost yourself horsepower. You cannot compress a liquid, okay? So if you manage to get it pushed through the motor, that caused a byproduct is heat. So you made a tons more heat. You're heating up the oil because you're trying to compress it. You compressed it and it went through, and your oil pressure gauge went to the moon, and you got it forced through there, okay? But you caused heat. You're broken down the oil. Here's another thing. You cost yourself horsepower. If you cannot compress the liquid and I'm forcing it, I'm drawing horsepower on this engine, which is kind of silly on most engines. On the compressed air engine, we're not doing this, but the distributor drive connects to the oil pump. And there's a reason for this. If you ever have an oil pump that locks up, everybody complains about the Ford has a spline oil pump drive, and it spins. It looks like an Allen wrench, and all these different devices that the manufacturer put on there. Chevy put a nylon sleeve on their oil pump, and we get rid of that and go to an ARP or a Melling steel sleeve on there. But that's another subject. But they put those safety features, which are Oh, that broke on me. Oh, I can't believe that oil pump spun that. I can't believe Ford did this real simple thing. Their distributor gear has a little pin in it. It shears that pin. All manufacturers put some kind of safety device that if the oil pump locks up, it shears the pin, the drive gear off the camshaft, and it stops turning the distributor. So it's actually kind of cool in the safety feature. Engine dies. I've had complaints. Oh my! Well, guess what? If they didn't put that and they made it real robust, I remember with Steel Power was making this oil pump that could handle so much, psi under pressure, and it's like, well, you're breaking other parts. You're inventing something to break another part that we never had a problem in the industry. But you want to try to invent something, the newest, coolest thing. I won't go to that story, but you cannot compress the liquid. So what does Smokey Unick always say? Always say, go. It's like rule. It's a rule. 10 psi per every 1,000 RPM is all that the engine needs. An example of there's always, you can't fit one rule for everything. There's always going to be different examples of something might be different. Well, a turbo motor or different applications. But the general rule of thumb that's never, ever bit me in the butt is 10 psi for every 1,000 RPMs. Okay? So if I'm idling at 1,000 RPM, how much oil do I need for my engine to survive? Let's see who now I'm gonna want some feedback to see if anybody's listening. Nobody said.
Everybody's listening, and there's actually other questions.
Okay, is Terry in the room?
Yes, Terry's here.
Well, damn, Terry. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Don't get disqualified. Don't disqualify me or unmonetize me. I've been waiting to crack this open.
Terry has been here since the beginning. Sylvia.
Well, the first thing that Terry comes in the room, shop mom, let me know that the show has started.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
Okay.
You were on a roll.
And that's because I watch vidIQ, and they say other people come and watch your live streams. So I'm trying to do up my game on live streams. In fact, I need to get Shop Mom mic'd in so that we're not just hearing her through an echo. But you got your viewers that are always in, and they say don't focus on your viewers. I don't really care about all that. Y'all are what we're focusing on. But they say, consider that somebody else might come on this live stream later and watch it. And if you have a lot of dead time in the front, waiting, saying, I'm waiting for more people to get in the room and whatever. So I've been trying, as soon as I turn the camera on, be a little more professional and start right off the bat coming out. But I'm now in my zone, or just about. So Terry, exactly. All right.
And before we go any further,
yes,
so that we don't confuse people, TR in the room is my brother.
And my brother.
Terry. And we have another Terry in the room. So, Terry Dolbo,
yes.
Is that how you say your name? Don't want to exclude you from the conversation. Welcome, glad you're here. While Danny's taking a breath, I should point out that there is a question that we will get to after I mention that Matt from the UK says, you are a fountain of knowledge and it's amazing that you share it. These videos get me through the week.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that people want to hear me talk. Like what Chop Mom always says, to take the knowledge that my uncle passed on to me and then let it die with me is really not letting Chief live on.
I can say it better than that. Knowledge taken to the grave is a sin.
There you go. Knowledge taken to the grave is a sin. So most definitely, I share. I do. I gotta tell everybody. My uncle used to tell me the same darn thing because we used to help other shops, and it was we can't build every engine out there, So we're a team. We're a group. Everybody, all the engine builders. We should be embracing ourselves as we're all in the same. We're the same family. As opposed to fighting with other people now because of YouTube and the beauty of technology. I can share Chief's words to everybody all over the world, and if I can help somebody not spin a rod bearing or in one of the examples of something that has happened, stop somebody else from doing that. Chief lives on, so there you go, and so does Smokey. I learned everything from Chief. That was my uncle, and then when I started to, as a teenager, to want to question more and more stuff, I would bring hot rod magazines, and hey Chief, what's a triangle valve job? I don't know what all it is, but just do this. I don't know. Just do this. After I started getting more and more into reading, I was into smoking, way before high school. But the more and more I read, I couldn't wait till I got a Circle Track magazine just to get to the back to read his question and answers. So the more and more I got to reading actual smoking unit stuff and actual, the way it should be done, the more I realized everything that Chief was saying was exactly that. He just couldn't explain it. Man, my uncle was born in Mexico. Not that he didn't know English, and like I said, Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, they came to Chief when they had a problem. No, it wasn't that at all. And the only reason I say that is just because he was self-taught. He was self-taught. So the more that I wanted a book, I wanted to read it in a book. And the more that I read Smokey Yunick stuff and his Power Secrets and all his books, the more it's like, well, we were doing a multi-angle VOD job. But Chair would just say, cut the 45, then we're going to cut the 30, we're going to cut the 60. I don't know, just do this. The more I started reading what the angles were and why we... It's exactly what I grew up, had to be done this way. We used to do a multi-angle VOD job to every cylinder head that came in the floor. I think VOD jobs were $7.50 or $11 a piece, and back in the way, I think it was like $50 a VOD job or whatever. Every head that left R&L in San Antonio had a multi-angle VOD job. And, but I wanted to know, all the angles and why the angles there for airflow. I have some people that are street racing in San Antonio that are well known for back in the day, that it tells me, how they're known for Ford racing and stuff. And he goes, who taught me how to port? Chief taught me how to port. And it's like, yeah, he told me where to cut here, but he didn't have a flow bench. We didn't know. We just know that, so he learned by experience and he knew what worked. So anyway, I'm glad to share the knowledge, and I'm glad that people even come on just to hear me talk and watch me drink a beer.
Okay, so there's a couple of other things. Lewis Brooks is here. Lewis Brooks has an observation. He heard a rumor that some 911 Porsche motors could run at idle with 0 oil pressure.
Yes, Lewis. Thanks for the room. And not only that, your Flathead Ford, not your Flathead Ford, but your Ford. I'm going to go to Ford before, but yes, you need 10 psi. Per every 1,000 RPMs. So if you idle 800, you need 8 psi, right? So the Ford manual, back to the way that the service was done on Ford, the Ford way to check oil pressure was to drive the vehicle to 30 miles an hour. So you drove it at 30 miles an hour, and that's when you checked oil pressure on a Flathead Ford. So, hey, they got a supercharger or whatever. I'm just sorry about that. But so at idle, a Flathead Ford.
That's Pat Cassidy.
Thanks,
Pat.
Thanks, Pat. At idle, a Flathead Ford, not only they can have 0 oil pressure. I've had people bring in a Flathead Ford, and we've torn apart and estimated them. There'd be nothing wrong with them. I mean, Babbitt bearings, they're the old soft bearings. It still had a bearing, not a Babbitt rod, but it had a bearing, but old soft Babbitt bearings. And I'm like, man, this thing is great. So why was it in? So now we're taking it apart, estimated. Man, it's not cracked. It's not this. What's the reason, that you have it here? And I generally ask when they bring in, they tell me what the problem is. But after I saw the problem, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. Oh, yes, it was. I just bought the car, and it has no oil pressure. Well, I'm going on the road, but at idle, I'm scared. Whoa, shut it off. I said, how did it sound? Beautiful. If you ever heard of Flathead Ford, there's a thing about a Flathead Ford. It's not, I want to say it's a rite of passage. It's just something that it makes no sense until you've heard one, or you put your hand on one, or it's just a thing that's kind of like an amazing thing. It's kind of like, now I know. Now I know why there's this passion for the Flathead Ford. It's just such a beautiful engine. And I'm like, he goes, yeah, it had no oil pressure idle. I rev it up and the oil pressure would come up. And I've had people say, oh, I'm running 40, I'm getting gear loop, I'm running all these thick oils. Okay, a Flathead Ford doesn't run on oil pressure, it runs on oil volume. Like the lifters, there's not even oil holes that go to the lifters. There isn't. There's a hole where the lifter drops in, and that's it. There's no all modern vehicles have an oil hole that feeds oil to a lifter, solid or hydraulic. There's an oil hole that feeds oil to the lifter. Not on a Flathead Ford, there's not. It's just splashed inside. I mean, so and Porsche as well. Dr. Honore, he's passed now. One of my early mentors way back in the day, and exactly right. You can have basically no oil pressure at idle. So that 10 psi per. This is I'm going by the old school. The chief's telling me, and here it is, Smoke Eunuch. I'm reading books, and that was one of his rules: is 10 psi for every 1,000 RPMs. So what does that mean? If you're going down the circle track or the drag strip at 7,000 RPMs, I need 70 psi oil pressure. So there you don't have 70 psi oil pressure at idle. You're gonna break something. There's no need. You're costing yourself horsepower. Since you cannot compress the liquid, the force that it takes to push hydraulics, at the very least, if you're not breaking anything, you're leaving a lot of horsepower on the table. How does that NHRA Superstock guy racing NHRA Superstock? You're down to the last race for the championship. They'll drain all oil out of the motor, and they're running zero weight oil anyway. They'll drain it all out and run a quarter mile with no oil. Why? Because the oil pump isn't turning anything. And I'm going for the championship. Yes, it's going to cost me an engine at the end, but this is it. This is the last run for the championship. That oil in the pan, spinning that pump, is costing you so much horsepower, it'll make the difference of winning a race. So you don't want to compress the liquid. Wasting horsepower. And all the people who want to come in and throw a lot of money to make 5, 10 horsepower, and yet you're taking away 5 or 10 horsepower by running the wrong oil pump or the wrong oil pressure. So I use that rule of thumb. It's never bitten me in the butt. There is exceptions to the rule. Don't go, this rule is good for everything. I said in the last live stream last Friday, what's an exception to the rule? A Ford Cleveland, a 351 Cleveland, that's an exception to the rule. If it doesn't have 70 pounds of oil pressure at idle, like John Hamilton says, don't take it off the trailer. It's not proprietary oiling, and they have an oiling issue problem. So we figured out that the oiling issue problem is we enlarge the hose, we radius everything, we throw a buttload of oil pressure, so that's the exception to the rule. That because it has an inherent problem from the manufacturer. But anything that doesn't have an inherent problem from the manufacturer, like I said, I use that 10 psi for 1,000 RPMs, and it's never bitten me. I'm not worried if my engine is idling at 10. Now here's the deal. Customers don't want to hear this and they don't want to see it. So I'll talk to them to begin with. Do you need to see 60 pounds at idle to think there's something wrong? I'll put a high pressure spring in it. But I spoke my piece. But if you're that guy that your buddies are all coming around and you look at your oil gauge, you see who has the more oil pressure. I got the bigger buckle. I got more oil pressure than you do. Ha ha. Tell me now. But also know that you're leaving horsepower on the table. I'll put the most robust drive gear on it that we can put just to make you happy. But it's either I'm going to make you happy, but I'd rather you would listen to my advice and then say, and I'll tell people, go read, whatever. But like my mom always says, give the customer what they want, or then they're just going to go somewhere else and get what they want. Now, if the line that I crossed, if I know it's not going to work, but if it's not going to really, you don't care about 10 horsepower and you want that high oil pressure, I'll give it to you. All right, so
okay, while
yes.
You're taking a breath.
Man, I got a lot of.
I want you to know that Hurton says he's going to compress some liquids tonight. He's going to put 6 Guinness in his belly. That is compression. Okay, having said that.
I have this disease about drinking. What is it? I've seen it all, and y'all have seen it too. My body doesn't produce alcohol, so I have to give a supplement.
Okay. Infamy wants to know, when rotor phasing, should the rotary cap contact be dead center, or should it be just a bit before to account for arcing?
I do, right when it just gets to it. That's exactly. Right when it gets right up to it. Yes, as it's spinning, we always have to figure that timing is the ignition trying to catch or trying to keep up to the engine RPM. So, and we said this, we've said this before. Low RPM. To think of a baseball player over a mound, and this ball is coming. That's your low RPM. The pitcher can swing it throw that ball and you can swing right on top dead center because you're going to hit it. Now you start getting faster pitch, more RPM. You're raising up the engine RPM. If I were to swing at the same spot, But now it's gone from, real slow to 50 miles an hour. I'm going to miss. The ball's going to go right across. So I need to advance my timing. I'm still hitting top dead center. I'm still hitting the ball over the mound. So it's really in relation to like baseball. I like this is like perfect analogy. And most people I tell this to, just like instantly go, I got it. Advance my timing, because now I have to swing. If the pitcher is pitching a ball to me at 100 and some miles, the professional is going up. I got a slow swing anyway, and that's another thing to consider. I have a slow swing, so every engine is a little bit different. But I better swing before he even lets go of the ball. If I'm going to even try to hit that ball over the plate, I have to advance my swing way. So because I'm not a very good baseball player, I have to advance my swing way more than Billy. Here's Billy. He's a better baseball player. So here's an instant that Billy is actually better than me. So he don't have to advance as much as I do. So everybody's distributor is a little bit different. They have different springs. To telling somebody a curve or a tune, unless everything is identical, and we can build two engines identical, and there's still going to be some differences in it. So does that make sense about the advancing and how I may need more advance than you do, but yet the pitch is still at 100 miles an hour. So RPM is still the same RPM, and I used somebody else's tune, and they said at this RPM I should have 30 degrees of advance or whatever it may be, and yet I'm having a little bit different. I'm having some pinging issues that he's not. Well, I may have a lighter spring in my distributor, and it's advancing way quicker. Okay, if your advances way quicker, you got to slow your timing down a little bit because it advances way quicker. I don't know if that makes sense. Somebody tell me it makes sense or.
It does make sense.
It does make sense. All right, so timing is an art. It's really an art. It really is. Well, what did I learn from Engine Expo? If you haven't gone and watched Engine Expo on YouTube, Engine Expo, Lake Speed Jr., Castillo, all these different masters of our craft are doing a 2-day expo. I like that they did it on Friday. Not so much because, like I said earlier, I guess I'm not going to get much work done today. And Sean Mom could agree with that. And then it's tomorrow also. And it's the masters of engine building. And it's going from boring, honing, and rings and all that. But there's a lot of nuggets of stuff in there. There's a lot of really good nuggets in there. Even if you know this stuff, it's nice to just get a freshen up. I encourage you to go look at. You can now go watch. Not now, when you leave here, if you want to keep, the mental thing of going with engine building and go and watch, because after the live stream, then it goes on and it just stays on their site. So tomorrow's also another live stream. It may still be going on. I had to log off because I'd rather be here. But, okay. Anything else?
Yes, there's another question, although I'm going to have to go back to refresh my memory on the others. But Terry Dolbo, I'm just assuming that's how we say his name, is a 615 cam too small for a 347 with 10.5 compression on a small block Ford?
Good question. Especially a good question in the size matter. What the main thing that we want to do, I don't think it is. We have to compensate for a lot of things. So really, it really depends on what cylinder head are you running. If it's a better designed cylinder head and it has high velocity, you don't need to kill the motor by putting in a humongous darn cam in it. It's all a game playing. And that's why every engine will sometimes, a cam that works for somebody might not work for you, and you don't understand why. It's all a package. And that's why a lot of times, I love the expo of these guys, Callies, all these different guys of, the engines that they've blown up and stuff. But unless you blow one up, I always, like I was telling John Mom, that's one thing I never want to do. But they're actually, if you're going into the competition to the levels that they're doing, especially pro stock, or if you're pushing those limits, then you find out it blew up. The ring end gap was too tight, and now he backed off. Well, it took until blowing up an engine or two before he realized it was the ring end gap. But you can't go by the ring end gap because exactly what like he was saying, which I said last Friday, it depends on cylinder temperature. that guy that you followed his thing, he may be running E85. It runs a lot cooler cylinder temperature than what you get, but nobody ever asked what's your cylinder temperature. So they ask, so all these variables come in. So I think you could get it done most definitely with the 515 lift cam. For those of us that don't know, the camshaft is what opens the valves. So we want more air in the cylinder. We only have a millisecond. Think about an engine at RPM at idle, it's 1,000 revolutions, per minute. So think about it at 5,000 RPMs. So the valve is just moving extremely fast. We only have less than a millisecond. I'm going to say a millisecond to get air in the cylinder before the valve closes. So the piston is going down, it creates a vacuum. It sucks air and fuel in the cylinder. The valve has to close before the piston comes up. It is an art for that valve timing, and just playing with the valve timing will change the characteristics of the exact same camshaft. So the exact same camshaft, I try to get a camshaft that I think, is what I tell everybody, if you know anything about camshafts, then you don't know a darn thing about camshafts. There's cam masters, I'm not one. I know more than the average guy. So what I do is I figure out a cam choice that I'm thinking with everything that I know, and then I call a master. And then I bounce off with the master. Bullet cams is awesome. They're never too frustrated to talk camshafts. And sometimes they'll be like, I agree, that's right on the money. I can give you several examples. A circuit track engine that I was doing that's going to run in the snowball race in Florida. I've never been there. I've never built an engine that raced there, but this customer wanted to do this snowball race. It's a big race that a lot of NASCAR guys will even come and get into a smaller class car and race that to keep them warmed up or whatever, in the off season. So it's a real big race. Type it in snowball race Florida. And I like to build torque. I could care less about horsepower. I say that in jest because it depends on what I'm building, what we're doing. But for the most part, torque is going to move your vehicle. Torque is going to be oh my God, what was that? Horsepower don't do jack to you. Horsepower may be the mile an hour that you're going down the straightaway. Torque is how far the wall moved when you hit it. Okay? So Torquus was moving this heavy vehicle. The heavier the vehicle, especially if it's a street car, the reason everybody's like, man, I can't believe how much power. Why? Because I forgot about horsepower. I worried about torque. You got a 3,000 or 4,000 pound vehicle. You want to get something impressive? Give that torque. So as soon as the light turns green, oh my God, an option is worry about the torque and build horsepower. Put a stall converter in it, have a clutch, and rev the bejeebas out of it. The light goes on, and you leave at the RPM range that this motor is making power in. But it's horsepower. You know what I mean? It's a different thing. So for the most part, torque is everything. Okay, how does a dyno calculate horsepower? Anybody? I want to wait for that answer while I have a drink. What's the formula, the calculation of how you figure out horsepower? Anybody? Back in the day, there was horses, right? So to figure out horsepower, DJ got it. We got the work and distance. Okay, that was in the horse days. Okay, so you got a plow. It's a torque. Exactly. So what it is torque times RPM. Okay, work and distance. Torque, and distance. So we have the horse and how far it can move a plow. It can move this weight and distance, right? That was so we're still using the same formula. So torque times RPM is what equals horsepower. So when I tell everybody, I don't give a crap about, excuse me, I don't want to get this bejeebas or whatever of horsepower. I really do. But how do you calculate horsepower? Torque, right? Work times distance. Torque times RPM. So if I build you a torque monster, the more you rev it, the more horsepower you're making. So there you go. So I never understood the math. So just think of gotta go back and it's working distance. It was a horse. They put a lot of weight on it, and how far this horse could move that weight as compared to that horse. It was a form of a comparison. It was a form of comparison that we're still using today. It's work and distance. Torque is the work. The distance is the RPM. So, all right. Physics. I didn't go to school, so I don't know. But I bet you this is a great point, and I'm going to go sidetrack on it. But teachers, I mean, if teachers would have brought in a blown small block, I mean, sitting there, an engine sitting on an engine stand, the blower on it in class, I wouldn't have been sitting at the back of the class drawing cars and hoping nobody calls on me. I would have been at the front of the class because it's weird. I wasn't good in math, but yet I was reading not a digital, we didn't have digital, a micrometer that went in decimals. So I could read a micrometer and I could mic a crankshaft but yet I had difficulties in school. I think if they would have brought in don't do something. I remember in school thinking, physics, you're going to teach me something I'm never going to use once I leave this classroom. And everybody thinks that. But yet it's all relevant. Theory of revolution. Anyway, so if teachers, how much would it cost? Bring a blown small block into class, roll it to the class. I guarantee you everybody's going to be in the front of the class and they're going to want to know about horsepower and they're going to want to, now's the time to use the math. Now they're going to, boy, it's just going to be, I would have been there. So,
thanks, Hurton.
Thanks, Hurton. That's the same color as my beer, so I guess it's time to drink it.
David Johnson says that's what his auto shop teacher did in high school. You had a great teacher, David Johnson. That's awesome.
Before you go, I want to say I didn't read it to right now that Hurton's got to go. Thank you, Hurton. We appreciate that, and you're always
Peace
here.
and Assembly Grease.
Peace and Assembly Grease. He's one of the OGs. It's not too late to be an OG, I guess, right? For everybody else, it's not too late. If you just got in, we've been doing this for a little while, but it's a nice group that really respects everybody, and I really love that. Okay.
So DJ has
and
a
Lewis
question.
Okay.
DJ is installing an electric vacuum pump for his Flathead. Is that a good idea?
Oh, for his Flathead. Okay, I want to say, Lewis, we'll see you in 2 weeks, Lewis. Okay, and I'm going to go. I'm all on vacuum pumps. Back in the day, we used to take vacuum pumps off of diesels, the GM diesel, because the diesel doesn't make any vacuum. So to control the brakes and everything else, they put an external pump, which was kind of like adding more stuff to an engine. We don't really care about all that. Then all of a sudden, we're starting to realize that pulling vacuum on the crankcase makes more horsepower. You should have watched Engine Expo. You don't have to watch that because I've been saying this for years. I've talked about it, I think last week, I talked about it several weeks back, about how important crankcase ventilation is. So crankcase ventilation is essentially a vacuum pump. For those of you that don't know, it's a belt-driven pump that actually sucks. So instead of making pressure like a pump, it pushes that out. But on the suction side, that goes to the engine. So because the engine has too big of a camshaft, too much overlap on the valves. Overlap is when both valves are open at the same time. If you tune the cam timing, back to your question of the cam 500 lift, if you tune it properly, you create tons of vacuum. But at a certain point with RPM, remember our timing, we're talking ignition timing. Now let's talk valve timing. So the same thing. If we start moving super fast, a lot of times we have to hold the valve open a little bit longer, or we have to open it sooner. If I open my intake valve a little sooner, I get more air in the cylinder. But my exhaust valve may have not closed yet all the way. That's overlap. That's the time that the exhaust valve is closing. The piston has gone all the way down in the combustion process. Boom. Piston goes all the way down. Right? Valves are closed. Boom. Goes all the way down. The exhaust valve now opens. Piston goes up and pushes everything out. The valve closes. The intake valve opens. As the piston is going down, it's now starting the vacuum process. So a four-stroke engine isn't the most efficient engine because not every stroke is making power. So half of the 4 strokes is what's prepping the engine to make power. It's using that to actually bring the fuel in. So now if I'm using my piston to suck fuel in, I create a vacuum. I actually also created drag on the motor because it's pulling the rod down now. On the compression stroke, it's pushing the rod down. But on the next time it goes around, it's pulling it down, creating vacuum. So valve timing is very important. So a lot of times we have to have overlap because I want to get the fuel in great as I can. I don't care about emissions. I'm not saying this me personally right now, but on a race motor, have you ever seen a nitro car? There's fuel going out the pipes. They're not really cared about fuel economy. Okay, that's overlap. That's a lot of fuel, raw fuel, because we want to get the most air and fuel in a cylinder for combustion. Every time we're going to have residue. We're going to have some of the old burnt gases. Boom. Remember, pistons going up? It's pushing everything out the exhaust. The valve closes and then the intake valve starts coming in. There's a split second there, a millisecond. I use millisecond all the time. That for the spot there, exhaust was going out. It closed. This starts to come in. We have still some of the exhaust gases that didn't go all the way out. You can't get them all the way out. Think about it. How can you get every little bit out? Well, that's taking place of new fuel coming in. So to make more horsepower, we like to overlap it a little bit. More overlap, the more thump, 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 thump the motor goes, right? That's really because it's overlapping and it's thumping because it sounds really great. But what we're really doing is leaving the intake valve open a little bit longer. So we open it sooner, a little bit sooner, so that the exhaust valve is going out. It's just about to close. We start to open the intake valve and let fuel start coming in. Yes, it dumps raw fuel out the exhaust pipe, but it cleans the cylinder. Now that valve closes and we got nothing but fresh air and fuel in the cylinder. Okay? But very bad. You're never going to pass an emissions test. Ever. Like I use the example of a pro stock or a funny car or a dragster, and you see all that raw fuel out. They're pumping fuel out of there to clean everything out. When the valves close, we got nothing but nice, fresh fuel. Not very good for efficiency. So if we're trying to pass an emissions test, now we go the opposite. And that's why I went with, instead of opening the valve a little sooner, we may hold it. Valve timing is everything. Valve timing is everything. Once you get close, if you're at the track, circle track or the drag strip, this is when the tuning, the guru comes in the tuning. Because I can advance or retard my valve timing and change the characteristics of my motor without changing the camshaft. So now I did all my homework and I'm pretty sure I got what I wanted. God, but it's still, I want to enhance it a little bit. The guru comes in and makes your badass motor even more, some more ass to it. I don't know. I don't want to get, I'm not demonetized.
Okay,
go ahead.
While you're busy ranting, can you say hello to Rose who has joined us?
I'll always say hello to Rose. There's
also,
go ahead.
Cesar is here.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, let's go ahead and find out what was that other question that I ignored. That's your opportunity to take a drink.
And I'm going to take a little thing, lawnmower. Yes, Robbie Knievel, we lost them. Me and my son were talking about that today. We weren't necessarily discussing who was better, Robbie Knievel or Evel Knievel. I'm old school. He's Robbie Knievel. Yes, I'm not taking anything away from the man. He's just an amazing guy. But his dad was doing it on they ain't 1,000-pound Harley, but he was doing it on an old school Harley. And it's a little bit different with newer technologies with better dirt bikes. Not taking a darn thing away from Robbie Knievel. He took what Evil did and just, leaped and bounded to another amazing individual. And we're losing a lot of amazing individuals lately. But
well, we're glad all of y'all are here with us today.
I just found out as well, Lawnmower. And I'm glad that all of y'all are here today so that we can at least share some quality time. All right, so...
Do you see EJ Pro Mod's question?
EJ Pro Mod, yes, I see David Johnson's question is too. And I said, okay, hold on. AC Pro Mods, last live.
You were talking about hypereutectic pistons. Is there any easy way to check pistons to know if it is regular cast or is it hypereutectic?
I can tell. I've been doing it. A cast piston is going to be, I don't want to use the witch test. Take a hammer and hit it. That's a witch test. Oh, I found out it was, but now you don't have a piston. A cast piston is going to be dull aluminum. And if you, next Friday, I can bring two pistons in and I can just kind of show you. You can tell. A cast piston, they're both cast in a sense. It's not a forging, so it is a casting. It's just a different material, the silicon content in the aluminum. But a high protected piston is generally real shiny. It almost looks like a forging in the shining. It's real shiny. And a cast piston is dull. It's dull aluminum. It almost looks whitish, a dull aluminum. If you'd like, if you leave me a comment before next Friday, I'll put a couple here, and I can show you the difference. And if I get close enough, but go look. I mean, I guess if you've never seen the two next to each other, then you can't compare. If I can see the piston even in a picture, I could tell you. But a cast piston is generally a dull aluminum, almost in the white, light dull aluminum. And a cast piston is super bright, real shiny, silvery. Real shiny, silvery as more to a dull aluminum. So I don't know if that helps. I hope it does. What was Dave Johnson's? Because we love Dave.
Dave Johnson's talking about the new Hyundai that he bought, the 2023 Sonata inline, has a 2.5 turbo, and on the dyno it made 288 horsepower and 305 foot-pounds of torque the other day. He says he's had V8s that did that.
And this is a Honda. See, Honda's coming. Well, I've been around for a long time in this field, and I saw all the imports starting to come in. When I started as a kid, the only thing that was an aluminum cylinder head was a Mercedes. The little 6-cylinder Mercedes, 4-cylinder Mercedes. There was others, but that was like something that came in the shop, and we saw. And then Vegas were cast iron. Everybody even went with the aluminum block, but kept cast iron heads. So we started seeing more and more, and then Honda, of course. Hyundai, boy, God, we used to build a lot of them. They were the jet valves. Anybody, y'all old school, old timers? Honda jet valves, Hyundai jet valves, Mitsubishi jet valves. They were throwaway cars. And then gave them about 10 years or so. All of a sudden, we weren't seeing as many of them in there. Anybody can overheat anything and tear it up. So you can't go, oh, well, that one had a blown. Like I say about a Honda, if it's on the side of the road, there's two reasons to the side of the road: run out of gas, or you didn't do a timing belt. Anybody a hose can pop off and the water pump can go out. So anybody can destroy anything. But in general, very good. Hondas are bad to the bone. They've come around really fast. I mean, 10 years is fast, whatever. But for several years now, I like them. They're still, they were a lot of plastics and a lot of stuff. Lately, man, they're bad to the bone, and we don't see the engine problems that we saw early on. So early on, if y'all are like Hyundais, I remember in their junk, that was at the beginning. That hadn't been for many, many years. So, Dave, let me know how that keeps progressing. If it's still bad to the bone, I like them. I like them.
He sent pictures to our Hotmail.
Okay.
Our Shop Mom Gmail account, and boy, is it a pretty car.
I do. I'm with you. I'm with you. Don't be scared of a Hyundai now. In fact, they're bad to the bone. Pat Castro said I have a 1980. I had a 350 horsepower with a hot rod. So I don't know if it had bigger cam. 1 horsepower per cubic inch is doable. It takes a good tune and a good engine builder and get the right combination. Not necessarily a big intake port is gonna make horsepower. The only way that a big intake port is gonna make horsepower if it was the restriction. So if you got 12, 13 to 1 compression, you're spinning it really, really fast. You got a big old camshaft, then you need that big port to go with it. But it's because you need the RPM, you need velocity. So don't ever give up velocity for size. Back to the size matters. No, a smaller port will actually make more horsepower. There's a certain point that, yes, it could be a restriction. Now, so I end on that. Is that my mom or is that Jim?
It's not your mother.
Jim, is that you?
Amelia
Webb would be my mom. Michelle part of San Antonio. I would not be here without her, including teething on asbestos gaskets at 1 year old. So I got to find that picture. And I literally grew up in the shop. I literally, there was no.
There was an exhaust down.
It was an exhaust gasket. I was chewing on, teething, and like my mom says, "You're doing okay, aren't you? Really, Amelia, what color is it? So anyway, My mom, I think in Mother's Day this year, maybe I could convince her to do a live stream with me because this is a woman in the field that set didn't have any didn't worry about the boundaries. You got to think think of my mom older and getting into a field that's all men and my mom knows every auto part in her head. I remember, growing up, we had to do tickets on carbon paper, and by the time I could go to the rack and the catalog rack, I still love a catalog rack. And if any of you old timers know, it starts off with 000, 100, 200, 300, 400, and you knew where the electronics were, you knew where the engine parts were, and you knew. And I could, I'm happy as R45T, and my mom was already putting the spark plugs on the counter. She would just hear. Anyway, my mom could basically put any part on the counter without a catalog. It's different now. Don't get me wrong. Now there's so many more parts, so many new cars. But I guarantee you, my mom still got it. So anyway, enough about my mom. I see Jim Cole now. That's not the same Jim Cole, is it? Is it my mom and Jim Cole in the room? I don't know, but somebody say something to me.
Yeah. Let's question whether it is your mom and Jim Cole. However, I'm trying to make sense of Dr. 62220's question. I believe he's asking, what does a 30, 40, or 60 or something valve grinded do to help a normal build? A one grind would work.
I already know. Okay, good. So at first I was thinking you're talking about the board, 30, 60, 40 board. No, you're talking about the angles. You were listening and you actually know what I'm talking about. Even you're right there. So I'm going to just, man, awesome. Okay, so a valve, man, you got me going because it's great. Because I like my uncle. Man, I saw a little light bulb come on, but I don't want to squash the light bulb because it could get real bright right about now. So think of a 45-degree angle. And I could use this as an example. So we have a 45-degree angle. I'm even holding it at about a 45-degree angle. The valve, if it's huge right here, comes in, touches that. Here's the valve stem. I need a drawing board for here. But it sits on the 45, okay? As it beats on the seat gets wider, okay? So the seat was this narrow when it left the factory. As it gets beaten on, the seat gets wider. The valve gets a little beat on too. The valve is going to go get cut. Not a problem. The valve doesn't affect the margin. Okay, so now we have this 45. Okay, there, right about there, and the valve is sitting in right here in the middle only. But now my seat is wider than the valve. Okay, so now we do a top cut and we do a bottom cut at a different angle. A 30-degree top cut and a 60-degree bottom cut. The 60 is already changing the transition from 45 to 60 to down the intake port, exhaust port. Doesn't matter, whichever port. On the top, we have a 30-degree cut. 30 and 60 is different than 45. So we use the 30 and the 60 to narrow the seat back again. We want the seat to be thinner than the valve. The valve is this wide. The seat fits in the valve. I'd have to bring, if y'all want to see this next Friday, I can add, now we're going to have maybe some pistons here. Maybe if you don't want to see them, I can bring a valve and paper and I can really get more into showing you. But this is very, very important. Everybody in the South, back in the day, everybody did a single cut valve job. They cut the 45, or 44, 45. I don't want to get controversy of there should be an interference. And the controversy of the different angles is something to do with the thickness of the seat. But anyway, that's it. Cut the 45, put it back together and send it out the door. It has compression. It works. But it killed the airflow. It just totally killed the airflow. That's why I wanted to know about airflow and the angle, the multi-angle valve job and everything else. And Cheo was like, just do this. Cheo is chief. Eliseo Garza, nicknamed Cheo. So after you do your 45, if I'm going to teach you, or somebody may be listening to this. So after you do your 45, take a black marker and mark your valve with black ink. You can even black ink the seat, or one of the two, any kind of blue Dykmans, any kind of ink. You can use just a Sharpie. Put the valve in the seat and spin it, pull it out. That's going to tell you where it's seating. And you're going to see that the seat is wider than the valve face. But now you see exactly the width of the valve face. Cut your 30. Cut your 30 all the way to the top of that. Cut your 60 all the way down at the bottom. By me cutting the 60 or the 30, I can either move my 45 up or I can move it down. If I cut more 30, I'm going to move the seat spot that it hits on the valve lower. If I cut more 60, I'm going to bring it up. On a race thing, we want to take the valve seating to the edge of the valve. Why put a 202 valve in there if you're going to put it at the middle of the valve? You might as well left a 194 valve in there. It's going to make more power with the 194 anyway. So if you're going to put in a bigger valve, make sure you, on the intake, you can take that seating area all the way to the edge. On race motors, some nitro stuff, we may take it past the edge. Why? Because the valve is going to grow as it heats up. Don't do that on an exhaust seat. Bring the margin in. If you take your exhaust seat to the edge, maybe if it's a drag car and you're trying to set some kind of land speed record or something, don't do it on anything endurance. You're going to burn a valve. The reason that you want to not be at the edge of the exhaust seat, we need a cooling ring. So we want to bring it in a little bit, about the middle of the seat, maybe a little 3/4, depending on the application. An industrial motor, heavy duty truck, propane, anything that gets the exhaust valve really hot, nitrous motor, we want a fatter seat, and we want to bring it in off the end of the valve a little bit. If you have it at the end of the valve, you're going to burn a valve. You're going to suck a valve, you're going to burn a valve, so you want to bring it in. So I'm using that 30 and 60. Okay. Play with the 30 and 60. Only because you heard 30 and 60 and you sit there and you grind your valves. I let the head talk to me. So when I do a head that I've never seen before, Subaru, something, whatever, I'll ink it, take my stone and kind of just touch it. And I'm going to change my top cuts. We want to leave the 45 alone, except we go the 55 on a nitro motor, and we have some different variants. I'm going to use the standard in the most, what we're talking about. Don't get confused now with me throwing stupid numbers. So 45 is just about everything. So we want to, play with those top and bottom cuts. It doesn't matter if it's a 30-degree top cut. It can be a 22-degree. It can be a 25-degree. It can be a 31-degree. A lot of times, on anything really exotic, I'm going to do 5 angles anyway. The 3-angle valve job is now doing a better, it's putting the factory widths back on the thing. So if a head comes in, now we're at 5-angle valve jobs. 2 White and Nerdy Volvo. I'm doing his head. I can bring it in right now. So the first thing we do is we cut the 45, right? So there's actually 5 angles. I don't have to touch every single angle. I just touched the 45, and we just want a nice clean 45 again. And now I'm going to do a top cut and a bottom cut to narrow it back to the way it was when it was manufactured, or narrower for performance, or I want to raise it for performance, or I want to lower it for turbo, or I want it wider for turbo. So we play with the 2 cuts. So the 30 and the 60, that's general. I'm talking about early 1960s and 70s Camaros or Mustangs, whatever. So on modern stuff, touch it. Just touch it. If the angle is not necessarily right, go to 22, go to 25. I'll change my angle to mimic the angle that the manufacturer. BMW used a different angle. Okay. When I touched it, I'm not going to go cut it to 30 because that's what my uncle taught me. I know I want to just touch the top a little bit because I just kissed the 45. So I'll go and I'll dress my stone. Okay, a little black ink, blue Dykmans, dress my stone, just touch it. Oh, let me go to 22. Oh, damn, Volvo does 27-degree. Oh, Subaru does. Play the top cut and the bottom cut. Don't just sit on the 30 to 60. That was general back in the day to an average or a performance back in the day 3-angle valve job. Those were the numbers. Now we're doing 5-angle valve jobs. And all the different angles is because we don't want the transition to be a sharp, so we do more angles to do a radius. We're getting even rid of the multi 5-angle valve jobs when you're using a 30. Like my mom has a 30. So that machine has a fixed bit that has 5 angles all in it, and you can add a radius to it. So what we've done is played around with different on the flow bench and found out what worked and added a radius cut. Exhaust works really good putting a radius. Now everybody's doing a radius cut on underneath the seat. So there's a bunch of different angles. If something comes in like that and I don't want to drive all the way to San Antonio and have it cut on the 30, I can go ahead and touch it with stones and just cut the 45, hit the top and the bottom cut. Don't sit there and reinvent the wheel. So there you go. But great question, because that means you were listening. Does that help?
So there were a lot of really good questions.
Okay.
I hate to break it to you. We have been here for an hour.
Oh, okay. So,
as much fun as this is, if you're going home with me, hon, you're gonna have to wrap
I'm
it
going
up.
home. I only got this much left. If there's anything that I may have missed to say hi to somebody, or I'm glad that I'm seeing that.
Let me interrupt myself to say, DJ did ask a question that I thought was probably very interesting to those people who like flatheads. He wants to know if there's, I'm assuming it's a he, is there any advantage to relieving the area from the valves to the cylinder on the flathead?
Yes. On the flathead is a little bit different. Always, I'm going to name one different because it'll probably be 30 minutes for me to answer this one. I won't. I'll try to make it quick. Don't put a bigger valve. Bigger is not always better. Sorry. You know, I've proven on the circle track, especially in street stock cars that are only turning 6,000 RPMs, 5,500. It's a street stock car. It's a different animal if we're doing an 8,000 RPM car. Okay, but I've actually had to say, if I'm wrong, pull the heads back off and I'll put 202 valves in there for free. Why? Just to prove I wasn't just proving a point. I know this, but I want this customer to win races, right? I want him to be in front of everybody, and you come to me because you want to be in front of everybody, and then you want to tell me I want 202s and 1600 on my street stock car. But it's a street stock car, and the rules say you got to run flat top pistons. It's a street stock car, and you got to run cast iron manifolds. It's a street stock car, and we had a faster time around the track with a 194 head. Okay, the valve was smaller, velocity picked up, we got more air in the cylinder, we made more power. Right around 5,000 RPMs, we're pretty much the limit of a 194. Okay, then we went to a 202. But see, there's a difference. I've maxed out the limit of that. Unshrouding, that's where we're going to. If you put, I'm putting a 202 valve in there. If you don't unshroud that valve, you made worse horsepower. You put the valve so close to the wall. Unshrouding means the cylinder, either the combustion chamber or the cylinder, that's the shrouding. In other words, we have a limitation. So I can put a big old valve. You know why they went to 4 valves per cylinder? Because of shrouding. The size of the valve doesn't matter. So the size doesn't matter. So if we're going to put a bigger valve in there, cut the wall away. Cut that wall. If you don't unshroud that valve, you actually have a wall next to a valve, and air is only flowing out of one side of the valve. When the smaller valve, air was going out all the way around. But you put a bigger valve next to a wall, air can't go because there's a wall there. If you move the wall back, you get more airflow. Now we get to the exceptions of these rules. Everything has exceptions. You got a yin and a yang. Always, sorry about that, but there is exceptions to these rules. The flathead exception is compromising airflow for compression. So a flathead, the valves are straight up on the flat deck and the piston's here. When the valve opens, air has to actually go like this down the intake manifold, up the port on a flathead, into the combustion chamber, and down into the combustion chamber, up, back out, back up, around, and out the cylinder. A Flathead Ford, the intake and the exhaust is just not, you can't even compare it to any other kind of engine, really. Anything that you use in a regular engine, if you try to throw that to a flathead, you might end up going, I don't know why it didn't work, or I wonder why, because you got to understand a flathead. So Ford, even on the later model, last of the Flatheads, the French Flathead, what they started to relieve the top of the deck. Where the valves are, they actually cut a groove. And here's the piston here. So they cut a groove so the air doesn't have to go up all the way over and turn and go down. So now it has a little bit more of an act. It does help airflow. But a Ford Flathead has 7-to-1 compression. 7.5 to 1, 7 to 1, 7.5 to 1 compression. It's very low compression. And then you cut a groove in the block. The French Flathead, they did that because that was an industrial engine. So the extra little enhancement of airflow didn't really matter about compression because an industrial motor wanted to be able to run on the lowest octane fuel possible. So now we have this issue of should we relieve a flathead or not? That wasn't the question, but maybe it is kind of should we relieve a flathead or not? There's a fine line. I do. In the one that we set, it was a Bonneville car that we built for the land speed record. I didn't do the normal cut all the way across. I actually did a hump. It was actually a lot of work on the Bridgeport, and it actually had a radius. It wasn't just flat cut, and it was actually radius, and it was radius. Many hand hours on the Bridgeport, and to try to enhance airflow. But why was that a little bit different? I wasn't running a piston out of any box. They came in a box, but they were special custom pistons. So we upped the compression. So now here's the thing, okay, we can get more airflow by relieving it. But if you weren't gonna change the piston, my advice would, is the extra airflow gonna make up more difference than the loss in compression? And I don't think so. One of the problems with flatheads is airflow. I think one of the things that people do is they put in too big of a cams and leave the exhaust alone. You can't get it out. There's Siamese ports. If y'all don't know what a flathead, there's so many things you got to worry about. Ford only has 3 exhaust ports, so the center port is 2 cylinders. Okay, you even have a thing with them fighting each other. One exhaust pulse is actually affecting the other one. So it's a Ford Flathead. It's totally a different animal, not something that really, that's a whole other thing. All right, so we're 7 minutes past. I hope that answered your questions. You can leave comments here. Send Shop Mama comments, especially if you want to carry on any of this a little bit further next Friday. Because now I'm starting to do, as soon as I turn on, I'm answering the questions that I had, other people had asked after the live stream or during the live stream. So I'm going to go through those. Shop Mom's going to go through those. I'm going to go through those and start off next week right there. So if you want to keep going on Flathead stuff, I'll go on Flathead all day long. If you want to go on whatever you want to go on. Terry, thank you. Hit the like button. I haven't even hit the like button yet. Tell your buds, tell your friends, subscribe, spread the word. We love doing this, and we're going to keep doing this as long as 8 people are in here. Now we got 39 people in here, so I'm awesome. I'm really liking that y'all are embracing what we're doing. For those that have asked, Faye, we do have something planned for January, a live stream with her back in the live stream. Right now, she's in All Girls Garage. So, let's wish her luck. They finished filming all week. Road trip. So, anyway, me and Shop Mom are always going to be here. Let us know what you want to, keep talking about. If I get a couple of things, that's where we'll start. And after that, we'll finish up. Peace and assembly grease, everybody. I want to go ahead and I think everybody is peace and assembly grease. That's what we say, old school. That's what we do, the old timers. Jay Scott knows what's going on.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up, but before we do, I promised Bicycle Guy that I would ask you this one question for him, and then I'm going to go over there and turn off that camera.
Okay.
But Bicycle Guy 111 wants to know, he's home porting a set of 186 small block Chevy heads. Would a 5-angle valve job be worth it for the street? Building a 421 stroker.
Yes, using the factory heads, you need to do everything you can to it. So yes, most definitely. The other two angles are, and you could do those with a sand roll. Because basically the other angles are just so that the transition just so it goes 60 and then hit the stock port. So you can go after the 60, after the 60 cut, start to radius it. We found that the radius really works good under the exhaust side. Everything the radius really helps under there. So you don't necessarily need to go, if you only have three angles, right after the 60, give it a little space and then start to do your transition and just break it up. Don't let it just go 60 and then sharp turn. Just help it. The same with the top. If you want to enhance airflow, I don't know what compression. Did he tell us what compression he's running? I may not seen
He
it.
did not tell me what compression he's running, but he can save that for next week because I'm coming over there.
She's gonna turn this off, but unshroud.
Unshroud
Most definitely.
Peace and assembly.
And peace and assembly grease. We'll see you next Friday, same place, same time, same channel.